All right, let's rewind the clock. We are going back to the years 1950s, a time when America was transforming faster than ever. World War II had just ended, and Europe and Japan were in ruins. Their cities bombed out and industries were shattered. But the United States, its factories, farms, ports, and labs all were intact and booming. By the late 1940s, America held nearly half of the world's industrial output and most of the world's gold reserves. And then came something called the Bretton Woods system, agreed upon in 1944 and put into force in 1946. This system pegged other currencies to the US dollars and the dollar itself to gold. In short, the US became the financial anchor of the capitalist world. Not everyone was thrilled, though. A senior official from the Bank of England called Bretton Woods the greatest blow to Britain next to the war because it officially marked the shift of financial power from UK to the US. But while America was solidifying its economic power, a new kind of war began, the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union. President Harry Truman led the US then. He came up with the Truman Doctrine in 1947, promising aid to countries like Greece and Turkey to stop the spread of communism. Soon after came the Marshall Plan of 1948, where America spent $13 billion rebuilding Western Europe. It wasn't just charity. Those countries became big customers for American goods. Then in 1949, the NATO alliance was born, tying America militarily to Western Europe. And when the Korean War broke out in 1950, America proved it was serious about containing communism. Meanwhile, the CIA was founded in 1947, and during the 1950s, it turned out into one of America's biggest foreign policy tools. The agency didn't just collect intelligence, it ran psychological operations, supported coups, and tried to push US interests across the world. Some major CIA backed events included the 1953 coup in Iran, the 1954 coup in Guatemala, the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba in 1961, and the 1973 coup in Chile. In 1980s, the CIA even supported the Afghan Mujahideen and Nicaraguans Contras. Of course, the CIA has always been controversial, accused of political assassinations, torture, domestic spying, propaganda, and even drug trafficking. We'll cover that wild history in a separate CIA video. Now, in 1950s, America was changing. Suburban life exploded. President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the Interstate Highway Act in 1956, funding about 41,000 miles of new roads. This gave a huge boost to car companies like German Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, to the oil industry, and even to the roadside businesses like motels and fast food chains like McDonald's. Television became a household essential by the late 1950s. Almost every home had one. TV fueled advertising and created a shared national consumer culture. Big corporations began to dominate globally, like AT&T ran telecommunications. IBM led the early computer revolution. General Electric powered homes and factories. DuPont made chemicals, and Boeing ushered in the jet age with its 707 in 1958. And here's something quietly revolutionary happened, which is containerization, introduced by Malcolm McLean in 1956. It standardized shipping containers, cutting transport costs dramatically. These containers could be loaded, unloaded, stacked, and moved by ships, trains, or truck without ever being opened. Today, almost all global trade depends on that system. Meanwhile, technology kept evolving after the Wright brothers first proved flight, and airplanes advanced through the World War I and II. And by 1950s, the skies were busier than ever. Nuclear power was expanding, and thanks to transistors, which was invented in 1947, electronics were becoming smaller and faster. Then came the space race. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first satellite. America panicked, and President Eisenhower responded by creating NASA in 1958. Soon after, in 1961, a young and charismatic John F. Kennedy became the president. He was the youngest elected president and represented a new generation of leadership.
Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
But his presidency wasn't easy. In 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion, a CIA-backed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba, failed miserably. A year later, in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. Soviet missiles were discovered in Cuba, and after intense negotiations, Kennedy managed to make them withdraw. That was a huge diplomatic victory. Kennedy also supported civil rights, although the landmark law passed only after his death. His leadership symbolized optimism, Cold War courage, and the beginning of the civil rights reform. But his assassination in 1963 shocked the entire world. Kennedy became a martyred icon of hope. Kennedy also promised to put a man on the moon before the decade's end, one of humankind's greatest achievements. The 1960s were still years of strong economic growth, real wages rose, and new tech was everywhere. IBM System 360 standardized computing. The Xerox 914 made photocopying common, and the Boeing 747 brought affordable long distance air travel. New companies emerged too: Walmart in 1962, Nike in 1964 as Blue Ribbon Sports, and Intel in 1968, which would soon revolutionize microchips. After JFK's death, Lyndon B. Johnson took office in 1963. He escalated the Vietnam War, which cost billions and deeply divided Americans. Then in 1969, Richard Nixon became president. He made some historic moves, opening diplomatic relationship with China in 1972, signing the SALT I treaty with the USSR to limit nuclear arms, and introducing the Nixon shock in 1971, ending the dollars linked to gold. By 1973, the entire Bretton Woods system collapsed and currencies began to float freely. Why? Because America could no longer back every dollar with gold. Huge deficits and spending made the fixed system impossible to sustain. Floating rates offered flexibility, but also brought volatility to the global economy. Then came the Watergate scandal, one of the darkest chapters in the US politics. Nixon's team was caught bugging and burglarizing the Democratic Party headquarters at the Watergate complex in 1972. When Nixon tried to cover it up, he faced impeachment and eventually resigned in 1974. Meanwhile, the world faced an oil crisis after the Yom Kippur War in 1973, when Arab states attacked Israel. The Arab oil producers imposed an oil embargo, prices quadrupled, fuel was rationed, and economies went into recession. Meanwhile, the war itself was intense. The US backed Israel, while the Soviet Union supported the Arab nation. Both superpowers resupplied their allies heavily, raising global tensions. Then came the second shock in 1979, caused by the Iranian Revolution. Strikes shut down Iran's oil production, causing panic and another spike in global prices. By the end of 1970s, America was hit by a painful mix of stagflation. That means high inflation, high unemployment, and slow productivity, while facing fierce competition from Japan and West Germany in cars, steel, and electronics. Industries in the US Northeast and Midwest began to decline. Factories either closed or automated, and this was known as Rust Belt era. The combination of oil shocks, inflation, the end of fixed exchange rates, Watergate, and economic competition reshaped the global economy into a tougher, more uncertain world, setting the stage for 1980s.